I love it because it allows us to appreciate our own talents, but also other people's, and then construct really great teams. Now, obviously, you need smart people, and obviously, you need committed people. Committed comes from the heart.
Welcome to the Wealth Strategy Secrets of the Ultra Wealthy podcast, where we help entrepreneurs like you exponentially build wealth through passive income to live a life of freedom and prosperity. Are you tired of paying too much in taxes, gambling your future on the stock market, and want to learn about hidden strategies for making your money work for you? And now your host, Dave Wolcott, serial entrepreneur and author of the best-selling book, The Holistic Wealth Strategy.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's show on Wealth Strategy Secrets. We've got another awesome show for you guys today. Today we're joined by Shannon Waller. I'm so grateful to have Shannon on the show with us today. She has been with Strategic Coach for many years as a personal coach. And Shannon is one of the most genuine, positive, and enthusiastic people you'll ever meet. Shannon loves nothing more than seeing people become better, happier, more successful versions of themselves, and facilitating the honest, practical conversations that help them get there. As she explains, being able to speak frankly about problems, obstacles, and mistakes is absolutely vital to success for both entrepreneurs and their teams. When you're dealing with reality, you have power. When you're dealing with pretend, not so much. A pragmatist at heart, she excels at making the complex simple and transforming obstacles into opportunities for connection, learning, and growth. Shannon, really excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Dave. I'm absolutely delighted to be here and to spend some more time with you.
Yes, no, this is going to be fun. And I know this is usually you're on the other side of the mic and trying to corral Dan Sullivan, which by the way is, I think, a unique ability that you probably didn't even realize you had, being able to facilitate him.
It turns out it's a thing.
Yeah, for sure. So for people who aren't familiar with you and your background, please share with us, how you got into coaching and a little bit about your background.
Oh my gosh. So before I joined Coach, which was in 1991, so well over half my life ago, I was really I've always been interested in people in business. That has always been my passion since I was 18. So my education is related to that. My conversations, who I love to work with, is anyone in business. I actually think it's the number one place for not only professional development, but personal development, because when you throw yourself against the marketplace, you learn a lot about yourself. So it's always been my playground, much more so than any other kind of industry I could imagine going into. So anyway, just through kind of fortunate happenstance, met Babs Smith and Dan Sullivan, co-founders of Strategic Coach, in 1991, I think in June. And then, long story super short, they approached a friend of mine to see if he wanted to work with them. Went down, saw a presentation, loved what Dan said, literally got back to the office, and the salesperson at the time, Susan, said, do you know where I can get a hold of Shannon, to my friend? He goes, yeah, she's right here. Passes the phone over, and the question was, did you enjoy the presentation? I was like, yes, I loved it. Stuff I'd known but hadn't integrated that way. That's one of Dan's unique abilities. And then she asked me this brilliant question. She's a initiating quick start on the Colby. She goes, are you happy with what you're doing? And out of my mouth pops, no, I'm bored. 5 weeks later, I had joined Strategic Coach. Initially supporting her doing sales, but then I'm excellent, not unique at sales. And so eventually in 1995, started coaching team members, because I saw this massive disconnect between entrepreneurs who desperately wanted to grow their organizations, and communicating that or translating that to their team proved to be incredibly difficult. So that's really sounds a bit lofty to say part of my life's work, but it's certainly been one of my passions since 1995, when I created, the Strategic Coach team programs. Since then, I work with entrepreneurs, their executive teams. I call them 10X team leaders. Recently, I just took over coaching the 10X level of the program from Dan as he moves up to what we call free zone. So yeah, coaching is what I love to do. And just for the reasons that you described at the very beginning, it's my passion to help maximize people's strengths, capabilities, results, but also their happiness and their fun. So I really get to do that. And strategic coach tools are epically fabulous to be able to help do that. And entrepreneurs are the business people I enjoy most. Our brains think alike. I don't understand corporate very well. Entrepreneurship is definitely the most fun playground ever.
Yeah, that's so amazing. I mean, one of the things that really struck me about Strategic Coach was, after building some businesses without it, early on, there was just this whole realm and world of corporate, right? And corporate America, right? And it's just like, as an entrepreneur, it's actually everything I was trying to escape, right? I was trying to get autonomy. I was trying to get freedom of purpose, freedom of time. But as you start building, a business in the traditional world, you just keep hitting these ceilings of complexity, right? As Dan likes to call them. And it just seems like, okay, the bigger you get, it just gets to be, not much fun. But with Strategic Coach, there's this amazing focus, like you talked about, around, not only your professional life, but your personal life, and how you can integrate the two, to really drive fulfillment, to drive this unique ability aspect, to drive the team aspect, and just, really truly make an impact.
Yeah. And it was such a relief to realize that there is another way to do it. It doesn't always have to be the brute force method. You don't always have to be a rugged individualist hitting your head on that ceiling. There are ways to, 3x, 5 times, 10x your income, your revenue, your profit, but also your freedom, your fun, your relationships. And so it doesn't have to be longer and harder that we're working. We can actually do it. We call it the 10X framework. But you really can think about how to do things differently, very much by tapping into what you were saying, unique ability. Even before we started, it's like unique ability is a multiplier. When you do what you love to do and are best at, you automatically get more out of it than you put in. It's just how, and every human being does have unique ability. Some people take a lot more freedom to be able to apply it. But that's only one of them. But when you combine that with some of the other ways of quickly accelerating, maximizing, the simple, elegant idea parts of your business and your team, you actually do get the life you want, not just the one you dreamt of. And there's lots of ways to build a business. Some are, well, to quote Joe Polish, some are hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating. What you want is easy, lucrative, and fun. So you can have a half business or an elf business.
Yes.
I'll take elf every day of the week.
Elf every day. Exactly. Now there's so much to unpack there. I definitely want to come back to unique ability, but, let's help the audience understand a little bit about being a rugged individual. And if you can just break down that concept, because I know a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with this.
And let's be clear, it's not that being a rugged individual is bad. Okay. In fact, it's really the normal, natural starting point is when if you imagine starting a business for a while, you don't have the funds to invest in anyone else. It is your chief cook and bottle washer. And that's not a terrible thing because you actually learn what it takes to run the business, to do the different things. You understand it at an intimate level that most people never do, especially in a corporate environment. But there's a point where it taps out. So it's actually a mindset. So rugged individual, the line that goes through your head is, I can do it better myself. Now, for very, very, very few activities, pardon me, that's true. But for most of the activities, it's not true. So what happens is you end up hitting that ceiling that you were talking about. So it's a law of diminishing returns. For a little while, you're on the up, right? But then you get a point where the more time and effort you invest, you actually get so tired and you're not good at a lot of these things that you actually go down the other side. And before you do that, you need to go, oh, in our vernacular, I'm not the who for this. And that's when you need to make that mental shift from being a rugged individual thinking, I can do it better myself. And we all know people like this. There's people, all of us have tried to help or support and who just are kind of allergic to their immune system rejects help. And like, I can do it better myself. It's kind of like a 3-year-old, right? It's like, no, I can put my clothes on backwards, but whatever. They just have that fierceness. And I was one of those fiercely independent kids, like, leave me alone. not a ton has changed. But it's, so being a rugged individual is a very natural phase of growth. There's nothing, but being stuck there, especially if you really have a desire to grow and you're being capped by yourself, we're often our own worst enemy. That's when it's time to actually have a mindset shift. And the mindset shift is from, I can do it better myself, to what we call unique ability teamwork. We can do it better together. Right. And so that's, pardon my voice. So we have this fun book called Who Not How, which I'm a huge fan of. A lot of people look at delegation as really a chore, a nasty to do that never works well. You invest in someone and then they leave and they go somewhere else and you're left doing it all by yourself again. Right. But when you actually find the right who loves to do it. So if you think about a new ambition that you have, a new goal in your future, and the normal approach is, oh, how do I do it? Which just decreasing energy, increasing fatigue, all the things. If instead you think of, oh, do I know a who knows how to do this? And we call it, I said this morning to somebody, whoing it up. When you who yourself up, it's like, oh, I can hire someone. I can trade. I can borrow. I can barter. There's something that I have that they want, and vice versa. And then you make that mindset shift to unique ability teamwork. But it means you have to be willing to let go. Sometimes that feels like a trapeze. And fly in space for a little while until you can do that. But it's so easy to get trapped by the rugged individualist mindset. At the same time, we've all been there. And in certain activities, we probably still are. It's not an all or nothing. But it's one of those things that the more you free yourself up, or who yourself up, as we like to say, the more liberating it is. The more freedom you have of time, the more freedom of money, the more freedom of relationship, the more freedom of purpose. Because frankly, if you think about it, all of us are put on the planet, whatever your belief system, with a few things that we are truly unique at. Then there's a lot of other things that we're really good at. There's a lot of things we're okay at. And there's frankly a lot of things we were not put on the planet to do. You put in the time and effort and you don't get the result. And so if you can just focus in on those few things, it's that multiplier, it's that automatic scale. And then you find other people who are also unique in all the things that you're not. All of a sudden that freedom just expands exponentially. It's one of those things that's hard to believe until you do it. But once you do, you're like, can't go back. It's just, well, you would know that. I'm sure you've got your own stories, Dave, of like, oh yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think Shannon, easily unique ability is a top 5 insight that I've gained, in my entire career, I would say. And just to help listeners, understand unique ability, we kind of talked to that. You can rewind and listen to one of our other episodes with Julia Waller, where we go into unique ability, but you can go into Kolbe.com, KOLBE.com. And it's just a 20-minute test to figure out your co-native ability of essentially your instinctual wiring of how you're wired. And I've had we now hire employees based upon this. Everyone in my family has gone through this. So wherever you are in your journey or in life, if you don't have a business right now, I can't tell you how powerful this is about just, learning more about yourself, learning more to create that teamwork. Like in our family, it's so amazing. I have one hire implementer, my oldest daughter. So when we do some kind of family project or on a trip, we're like, you know what? Adelaide's in charge. Like she's got it. She does the planning, all the logistics, let her have at it. And then, we free ourselves up or who ourselves up, right? And let each person kind of stay in their lane. Yeah. And it creates so much harmony. I mean, we have 6 people in our family. So it creates so much harmony, I would say there. And then also, from a team perspective, I mean, my first business, we hired based on skills, right? I mean, the traditional method in looking at different skills and people in the role. But now it's all based on unique ability. So, I've got fact finders doing the work that I don't want to do, and they absolutely love it. They eat it up and do it better than I could do. Right. So everyone, as you say, I think it's so powerful because it really becomes a multiplier, right? By adding that additional capability.
Well, and I love, just to touch on what you said for the family, it allows sometimes much younger children to really feel valued and that they have purpose and a contribution, because they're going to do things that other people in the family won't do. How amazing for a younger person to have that sense of intrinsic capability. I mean, it's tough to find in this world of social media. So I think actually you're really equipping people when you do that. I profiled my husband before I married him with the Kolbe profile. Turns out we're almost twins. Fact finder follow through. We both prevent. He's a 2210-4. I'm a 3295. And so it's like, okay, if anyone's going to plan or organize in this family, it ain't us. And so, and here's the cool thing about this, Dave, is that it meant that we didn't have any guilt. Like there are so many wives, there's some husbands. Husbands tend to feel guilty if they're not handy. They don't have that hands-on implementer. Mm-hmm. Women tend to feel guilty if they don't love organizing and meal planning and laundry, all of which I can't stand, by the way. But I have no guilt about that. I know how my mental energy plays out. If it's having an innovative, useful, quick start conversation with you, Dave, all in, all day.
Yeah.
You and I already decided there's about 3 topics we could talk all day about. Right. So there's it's this freedom from guilt. I didn't even talk about that, but that's kind of amazing. And that's also true of team members. You get to value people who might be lower on the traditional totem pole, but they bring such a unique capability to your team and to your company, and they leverage you so much that they get a ton of deep appreciation. Like my support partner, Katrina, who helped organize me being here and showing up when I'm supposed to, she loves scheduling. For her, it's like Tetris. For me, it's torture. Torture. And I'm not good at it. And I probably have myself, and Dan too, he'd have them booked in 3 different cities on the same day. Not a good idea. Right. So I love it because it allows us to appreciate our own talents, but also other people's, and then construct really great teams. Now, obviously you need smart people, and obviously you need committed people. Committed comes from the heart. Intelligence, obviously, from the brain. But then knowing how someone naturally strives and take action, and Kolbe is the only validated instrument that does that, so could not recommend it highly enough, is so useful. And I Kolbe my kids, my daughter Charlotte, who's now 19, but in grade 3, she printed off her Kolbe profiles and she put them into plastic folders. And I think there were 4. And she had colored duct tape, and she put her name, and she handed her Kolbe profile to all of her teachers. That's how much she buys into it. Wow. She's like, this is who I am. She's a quick start implementer. So she was very spontaneous and not terribly book driven. So it's just fun. It's just so validating. And that's really the benefit of, and it gives you language. There's lots of other great profiles and tools we use too, to help label and name your unique ability, to give you a language with which to articulate it. But knowing that, so, it's fun to see if both of us are maximizers on Clifton Strengths, or both of us are quick starts. And all of a sudden that's this amazing shortcut where we know how to connect and communicate with one another. It just shortcuts the process of getting to usefulness, if that makes sense.
100%. And especially, look, I mean, most of us are brought up in traditional academia. It teaches you to work on your weaknesses, right? But we realize in the business world that it's all about identifying your strengths, doubling down on your strengths. Yes. And then if you're an entrepreneur, just like Dan says, right, it's all about shortcuts, right? Because we're trying to be faster, better, cheaper, right? At every level. So how are you going to do that? You got to maximize those strengths, right?
Totally. And I love one of his early expressions. It's still one of my favorites. It cracks me up. He goes, well, if you work on your weaknesses for a really long time, what you have are really strong weaknesses. Right?
Yeah.
And it's this mindset of trying to be all things to all people. It's like, no, we are unique individuals. And when you start taking that seriously, as Dan also often talks about, and you really appreciate it, which means it goes up in value, right? The world looks different. And then you get unhooked from some of that traditional mindset programming, whatever the heck you want to call it. So you get freed up to operate very differently. And then people start looking at you like, what are you doing? You're obviously very successful, but you're taking a lot of time off. And didn't you just go on a trip? And weren't you able to contribute to this charity? And it's like, how do you do all that? And they get super curious. It's very fun.
Yeah, that is literally, Shannon, the core and the ethos of our company and what we're trying to help with our clients, right? Is break free from, not only in the financial world, but, from conventional wisdom, right? And the way
Yes.
things were taught just because they were taught. They were done that way for so many
Mhm.
years. And our parents taught us that, our employers taught us that, right? But it's kind of breaking down some of those, paradigms that were there. And how can you have enough courage to, right, think outside of the box.
And this is the word I was looking for before. It's the narrative. Like, how can you break out of that common narrative? And, our school system was fabulous when in the 60s and 50s, people were going into factories. The job of the school system was to produce people who would work well in factories. That's not our world anymore. We now live in a networked world where you can find and research and tap into capabilities across the globe. I was just looking at one of our chats within our coach community, and someone saying, hey, one of the program advisors saying, hey, one of our clients wants to have this work processed overnight so that when his team comes in the morning, they can work on the processed quotes, is what it was. Does anyone know of a resource? Right? This is awesome. Like, when could we do this before? We can tap into very specialized talent. So we're not in factories, and we need to unhook our own thinking from how we were trained. We definitely need to encourage our kids because they're not working in that factory world. And sometimes our clients too need to learn to be validated that their unique capabilities are worth investigating, acknowledging, celebrating, being talked about, exploring how they make a unique contribution. It changes the conversation completely. And it's like one of the most fun conversations to have in my world.
What if everything you thought you knew about investing was wrong? Would you like to create a wealth strategy like the top 1% have and get exclusive access to top private equity deals that provide downside protection, tax efficiency, predictable cash flow, and have a lucrative upside? Discover how with the Pantheon Advantage and join our investor club today at pantheoninvest.com.
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing that we shouldn't underestimate as well is just the energy component of unique ability, right? So this piece was also just really amazing to me. It's like, if you think about certain tasks, that you usually do. So like for me, it would be like administrative type tasks or high fact finding, read some kind of contract and things like that. And, before you know it, you're a few hours into your day, you haven't accomplished much, you're feeling tired, you're just kind of dragging and everything. But when you're in your unique ability space, it's unbelievable. It is the energy that you can go all day and keep going because it's natural to you, right?
100,000%, if there's such a thing. It's interesting. And when you do activities that are draining for you, it might only be 5% of your day. It can easily be 50% or more of your energy. So it's like, oh, well, everyone has something they have to do things they don't like. I'm like, is that really true? Really?
Right.
Maybe until you figure out the right who, that's true. But really, I think we kind of get a little sucker punched into thinking that we have to be depleted, that there has to be pain, that it has to be hard. And I'm sure I can actually hear people as they're listening to this going, blah. Because it's such a common message. But the truth is, and and I know and everyone knows, we've all had a day where somehow the stars aligned, the universe was designed with you in mind that day, and everything you did was just a joy. There was a great state of flow, as the expression goes. And you're like, whoa, what just happened? You were doing your unique ability, probably with your right audience. The key part of unique ability, and you end up more energized at the end than when you started. Like I had a really long day yesterday, but all of it was in my sweet spot, in my area of unique ability. And this is not usual and common. I don't recommend it, but it was a 15-hour day. That's not my normal day. Wow. Just to let you know. It may also be because I have some free days coming up. So that might have something to do with it. But I could coach all day. I could talk about these concepts and tools all day long because it gives me energy. So this is the cool thing about unique ability. So if you look at incompetent, competent, excellent, and unique. Incompetent, this is when you put the time and effort in, you don't get the result. You are not put on the planet to do this. Competent, which is what is so rampant in corporates, like we want these core competencies. I'm like, Well, if it's reading, writing, and arithmetic, sure, I can understand, but really? So competent, that's a minimum standard. You're adequate, you're okay, but you're not, no one's ringing any bells for you on that one. Excellent, which is where most people get trapped. And I'm going to guess that most of the listeners are trapped, have some excellence. This is where you have superior skill. You're better at it than most people. There's a lot of teamwork. There's a great reputation. There's cash. You get a lot of external rewards, but internally you're like, oh, it's brownout, not burnout. You're like, really? I've already got 15 t-shirts. Like, do I really need to do this? And then unique ability is that same superior skill, but with passion. You love it. It lights you up. Literally, people's eyes light up. So I look for when people's eyes light up or they lean in, I'm like, I know what I'm looking for. So it's really fun. And to your point, you can always see room to get better because you care about it, but there's a lot more energy. So at the end of a coaching day, which I had on Tuesday, my feet were tired. I used to standing in high heels anymore after 2.5 years of lockdown. But I was so psychologically, emotionally, mentally, all the other things, like alive.
Yeah.
Best drug on the planet and all internally generated. Right. So sorry, that was a long addition to your energy point, but it's so true.
It's so great. Yeah. And I think for the listeners out there, a great way to characterize this, that Dan talks about, right, is it's something that's fascinating and motivating to you, right? This is just such a great way to kind of encapsulate it. And, there are so many people that are, from the outside, they're successful, right? Maybe they're a doctor, they've reached a certain level, executive, they have their own business, whatever it is. But they're challenged with some of that, fulfillment, right? Mm-hmm. And purpose and everything. And kind of, in our concept, Shannon, right? We talk about the holistic wealth strategy, and that was my book. And it's really kind of a breakdown. And at the core of it, it's really freedom of money, but the freedom of money is what gives you all these other things, right? Like freedom of time and purpose and relationship. Mm-hmm. So when you can peel back the layers and understand yourself with unique ability, right? It's so insightful to be able to then, rechange your wiring to be focused on that unique ability, things that are fascinating and motivating, things that are energizing. And it's like amazing how, work is fun. Work is really a blast. Yeah.
There's a fun stat that I think you and the listeners will enjoy. So, Louis Schiff, connected with Inc. magazine, fabulous author. One of the books that he wrote is called Business Brilliant. And he came and gave a presentation on it. So I can't remember if this information is from the presentation of the book, but I'm pretty sure it's in the book. And he studied, so he and his colleague and partner, Russ Allen Prince, studied ultra high net worth people, so roughly 30 million above, high net worth, and then middle class. I think that was kind of the 3 levels that they went to. And they asked each group, how many things are you really, really good at? When they asked the middle class, they're like, oh yeah, I'm really, really, really good at 5 to 6 things. They asked the ultra high net worth, 1.9.
Wow.
They admitted to being really, really, really good at less than 2 activities.
Yeah.
Does that tell you something? You might,
exactly.
we might want to take a page out of that book. And they're like, no. And they're who, not how in action. They're like, oh no, I'm only really, really good at 1 or 2 things. Well, darn, I don't think that correlation is a mistake. I just find that fascinating. And so research validates this, which is fun.
No, it's so true. But again, I think it's so challenging for people to let go of some of the limiting beliefs. And I'm even seeing it with my kids now. So they're in their early 20s and just really struggling with, that purpose and figuring out where they fit in, what they like to do, and they didn't like school and all these things, right? So, so it's really trying to find that. But I think, the more you can really embrace and understand that unique ability kind of concept, it's just really huge.
It really is. And I love 20 somethings. That's actually one of the other audiences that I enjoy. So my eldest daughter is 22. And so I love talking to her. I love talking to her friends. I'm buddies with some of them. They'll meet with me for dinner. I'll have them do their Colby profiles. Like I will do all the things because I so want to support them. And I really do think that I was confused between 18 and 24 probably. So I understand that, but we live in a very big, complex, multidimensional world that I think it is really hard to figure out how you're going to create value. So giving kids the tools and the mindsets, and again, something that you and I are both very familiar with, really understanding how things look from the other person's point of view. So what does the world need from you? Where is there a danger you can solve? Where's there an opportunity that you can maximize? How can you reinforce people's strengths? How can you create value? Like what's a problem you are passionate about solving? What problem do you find endlessly fascinating and motivating? Well, that'll keep you busy for 25 years. The problem of entrepreneurial teamwork and the lack of harmony between it has kept me fascinated since I was 18. That was 39 years ago. It's a long time. Yeah. 38 years ago. So yeah, so long time. And it's just, when you can find the problem that you're interested in throwing yourself at and using your talents and your capabilities, and then you build connections and all the other ways that we've all learned how to be successful, it's really powerful. But I think it is extra challenging. And I think kids these days need that extra help because they have so much external influence, again, social media, but just media in general, without a lot of clear direction, that giving them a strong sense of who they are internally and what their goals are can be a massive, and then again, how can they create value? Give them that recipe. Then we're kind of setting them up for success better.
Sure. Shannon, what do you think in terms of, all the years you've had coaching, if you could boil it down to just, 3 concepts, what would be the most powerful? Probably unique ability teamwork is one. Right?
Yeah, which is actually kind of, I'm going to cheat because who, not how is kind of unique ability and unique ability teamwork all combined. Mm-hmm. So yes, I would definitely say that's one. And the second one would actually be what I was just talking about. And that's really our value creation formula. It's like using your unique ability. How are you going to create value for your audience? And you're going to do that by understanding their dangers, their opportunities, and their strengths, which are all they're all driven by emotion, fear, excitement, and confidence, and then figuring out your value creation. So that essential formula is something for me that is another core concept, because when you know DOS, and that was, I think, the first concept that attracted you to Strategic Coach, which is really powerful. Oh my gosh, how do I choose between the gap and the gain and the 4 C's?
I was going to say was 4 C's in there or not?
Yeah. So
why don't you go through each of them? Yeah.
Yeah. And then other people can choose and I get a bonus. So the 4 C's, again, is something you've experienced, but one of Dan's geniuses is actually being able to take what is common, but not obvious. So everyone's gone through this experience, but then you named it and you're like, oh, right. And then you can apply it very consciously. So again, when you set yourself this bigger target, the first step, some people would say clarity, but Dan says commitment. You have to commit until you commit. And commit is a word that Colby uses. This is when you actually decide, you commit to take action, sometimes without knowing everything, right? Then you go through this wonderful, horribly feeling stage called courage. We love confident. We love feeling capable and confident. The problem is we don't know how to get there. And this is what trips up kids all the time, because you have to be willing to make that commitment and then go through that feeling of courage. And everyone knows this. You know this when you have committed to something and then you're like, oh crap, what have I just done? You promised to give a speech. You promised to be an MC. You promised to join a board. You promised to contribute a chapter to a book. You did something because you got excited and then you didn't know. And you're like, I don't know how to do this. And you scare yourself. So that's the courage phase. But what's interesting is that if you're willing to stick with it, and Dan has a great expression, you can have short courage or long courage. So the more fully committed you are, the shorter your courage phase. I'm all for short courage. Not interested in long suffering. The more you commit to it and throw yourself in, the faster you create the capabilities. That's actually the function. It's kind of like learning to swim when someone throws you in the pool. Okay.
Right.
It's
Right.
that kind of circumstance. And then you develop these capabilities and then you become super confident. Like I remember the very first time I hosted a webinar, terrified. I needed like this whole cadre of people supporting me. Julia would make me little like stars and emblems and give me awards just for doing it. Well, now I can do it in my sleep. I did one before lunch, right? It's like not a big deal, but at the very beginning it was huge. And then you develop this confidence. You're like, what's next? So then you go scare yourself again. You
Yes.
make the next bigger commitment. So that's the 4 C's. And then the gap and the gain, it's probably the most important for high achievers, to be honest, because we can get so sucked into measuring. We can get sucked into the idea of potential, very dangerous. We can get sucked into the idea of the ideal, right? And we can be incredibly successful and incredibly unhappy at the same time, because we're measuring ourselves against our goals. And by the way, when you're doing the 4 C's a lot, you keep setting bigger and bigger goals. You've got this ideal. Oh, this is my perfect week. This is my perfect client. This is my perfect house. This is my perfect kid. This is my perfect spouse. This is my perfect body. Well, perfect lasts for about a split second in my experience. So we measure against perfect and our measures keep changing. Oh, I thought I need to be this weight or this blood pressure. Oh, it's actually now I should really be this. So it's a moving target. It's like chasing the horizon. You can run real fast. It can be dark outside. You're still never going to get there. So the ideal is really useful, but it's a mental construct. We made it up, just like the horizon. Instead, we need to look and see, where do we come from, right? And measure our gain. And that, if I'm going to talk to an audience that I've never met before, I will almost always start with the gap and the gain. And because it's the one where like people are like, oh, I've been in the gap for decades. I've been putting my husband in the gap. I've been putting my wife or my kids in the gap. We hear that a lot. My team, put my team in the gap, because people are not trained. They haven't trained themselves. They haven't thought about their thinking to measure from where they started. And if they look at where they started from, they're like, holy mackerel, look what I pulled off. Look what we pulled off. Look what we're capable of doing now. So really learning how to celebrate the wins and to use that confidence to set a new exciting goal, but not to beat yourself up by not achieving the ideal. I think for mental health and well-being, it might be the most important concept, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And what's interesting is as you go through the 4 C's, right, it actually starts to become a capability and a muscle that you have, right?
Yeah.
So now you're starting to think about that, with everything. And, we're always just like Joe Polish, it's like do something scary every day, and we're trying to do that in our family or with work or whatever. You have to get out of your comfort zone and really have the courage. And it's the same even in the investing world on the financial front. You have to take the courage to ask some questions, do some things differently, see what kind of makes sense, for you. And then on the gap and the gain, I mean, it's just so important to be able to, look backwards. And, I've been on many of your calls on the mornings, Monday mornings, even doing the, setting up your weekly planner and getting crystal clear clarity in terms of what's on for my week. And one of the things that Shannon does as well is, right, there's a weekly planner and there's a whole process, but it's all about, talking about your wins from the prior week, right? And this positive focus about, what did I accomplish, on a health front, personally, with relationships, with work, what was that? And then try to build off of that momentum. So it's great that, you do that and you can incorporate that in so many places in your life. I mean, my wife and I, when we connect and we walk the dog, it's like, it's the first thing we talk about. What are your 3 wins for the day?
Totally. I do that with my husband. I go down. Oh, he starts in the morning. I just got him an Oura ring. He's got his Apple Watch and I hear all about his sleep scores every morning.
Nice. Yeah.
That's his first positive focus, which is really fun. And I can be in 5 meetings with you and we'd go through 5 different positive focuses if it was that kind of a day. And it's interesting, starting your week with this is so critical because presuming we're up to big things. All of us have things that are super important to us. And we can start from feeling like, oh my gosh, I didn't do this. I didn't do that. This hasn't happened yet. I should be further ahead. Could, would, should, all gap words. And Marilyn Waller, whom you know, my mother, Julia's my sister, should was a 4-letter swear word in my house. I was not allowed to word this. I could get away with swearing and cursing much more easily than I can get away with the word should. And then when I met Dan, he was like, should mean it's an external expectation not created by you. Externally imposed expectation not created by you. So you didn't make that up. Somebody else did. So I think it's really important to really look at what you're measuring and where are you measuring against an unrealistic ideal that's going to keep moving, or are you going to look behind you? So I think that's really key. And starting the week that way, when you start from a bank of confidence, like extract all the value. You've heard me say this, like go mining. Last year is a gold mine, and your job is to go find all the gold and write it down, personally and professionally. And that's going to set you up for success. And you have the confidence to do new, scary things. It's kind of like the 4 C's in action, right? You're writing down what gives you confidence, and that's going to propel you to do new things to get you out of the comfort zone. And on that note, I think you will totally enjoy this. I was coaching a workshop of 10X clients, and they're like, if I'm not always a little bit scared, I get nervous. If there's not a little bit of fear, uncertainty, and discomfort, I'm like, I get freaked out, because they're used to being on that edge, right? Yeah. They're used to being on the edge of a little bit like, am I going to fall off? And that's when they feel most alive, most creative, probably, frankly, when they're doing their best work. If you freak yourself out to the point where you can't function, not healthy. And if you're so comfortable, you kind of fall asleep, also not good. But there's a nice balance to keep in the middle of the 4 C's.
Yeah, I mean, the psychology is so interesting, isn't it? Right? Like how the brain thinks. And also, if you go back and really look at our natural wiring too, right, as humans, right, we're on the lookout for danger. Right. Totally. So we want to react to, something that could be coming. And we live in such a world. I mean, especially, we're recording this beginning of 2023. Are we going into a recession? There's just so much uncertainty, war, like all of these kind of things. But, you have to really build those skills and try to drive out what is certain, in your life, and build upon that momentum and take action with the things that you can. And it's amazing how much you can just, see the results unfold in front of you, regardless of all these extraneous things.
I think that's an incredibly important point. And Dan and I recorded a podcast Inside Strategic Coach, if anyone's curious. And he was, I love this conversation. I'm like, Dan, there's a lot of talk about the upcoming recession. And by the way, Dan made the choice to stop watching television 4.5 years ago. So he goes, I've noticed the world's gotten to be a much nicer place since I stopped watching television. He got something like 400, 800 hours a year back. It was crazy, which now he reads and exercises and does other things. But he's like, okay, this recession, he goes, I said, so we talked about a bunch of strategies, which is really kind of going back to what we were talking about, being super clear on what your unique contribution is. How can you create value for your audience that you are in touch with, that like what is your personal economic system, regardless of what's happening in the world? How can you create value for them? Go and do that and help people see their future. We have a great question called the R factor question, which is simply a future-based question. So I better say it now. So if we were meeting here, say even 1 year from today, what has to have happened for you, both personally and professionally, for you to feel really happy with your progress? That's the question. Then your job is to shut up. Right? And just listen. Because he said, what happens when people are scared, right? When their amygdala is triggered, is that they run out of future. Well, people who don't have a future don't spend, they don't invest, they don't move. We all tighten up. That's a natural safety response, right? He said, when you help give people back their future, then you can create something together. So we talked about all those strategies, a couple more in addition to that. And then, so I said, oh, Dan, this is a great way to be a recession proof. He goes, recession proof? Recession oblivious. And I just cracked up. I'm like,
right.
Go, Dan.
Right. So I heard that episode. It's right? Awesome.
Yeah. And so I'm like, trust Dan to say that. And it was really fun, because when we actually take control, when we take our own experience seriously, what we can actually impact, as you said, what we have influence over, and tune out a little bit the narrative, because it's frankly not in your best interest. I'm not even sure whose interest it is in. And if it bleeds, it leads. So it's designed to scare you. Let's be clear. And you actually focus on your own achievements, your clients' achievements, your family's achievements, your neighbors' achievements. And then you build on that for how can you be intentional? How can you create more value? How can you expand your positive impact? All of a sudden, you realize, I'm okay. My life is fine. And the people around me, I'm helping them be more fine too. And so we can shift tides with this kind of mindset, but it means stepping back and taking your own experience more seriously than you do the news or other people's.
Yeah, really, really powerful. Shannon, to really try to, tie the knot on this and make things actionable for listeners, if you could give them just one piece of advice about how they could really make some progress, right, with some of the concepts we talked about today, what would that be?
One thing. That's a challenge.
This is my coach audition.
Yeah, clearly.
Right? It's a good question.
And this is less of an exercise, but more of just something to remember. And it goes back to what I just said, actually. It's to really take your own experience seriously. Where did you win? Where was it easy? Where was it hard? What are you clearly not designed to be doing? Why are you still doing it? Like really take yourself seriously, appreciate what you've been given, or what's factory installed, as we like to say at Coach, and take that seriously. Because I think life starts to change when you do that. Then you start paying attention to your own narrative as opposed to somebody else's. And I think until one of my personal mottos is know thyself, which is why I love all the profiles. When you do that and you start taking yourself seriously, stuff shifts, things change for the better, because then you're clear on what you want, not what other people want. I have some odd hobbies. So I don't have very many domestic talents. Baking is one of them, but I didn't want to eat a ton of sugar. So I'm like, I need something else. And I like to use my hands. So, and I also get frustrated by dead limbs on trees at our cottage property. So I went and bought a battery operated chainsaw. I love chainsawing. It's really fun. I do it on my property. I do it on my friends. My husband was no help at all. His chainsaw also does not work as consistently as mine. She has what? A chainsaw? I've got pictures. And then I picked up watercolor. That was so. Is that a common set of hobbies to have? No, I don't care. It's me. Do you know what I mean? So it's fun. It's entertaining, which I also enjoy. But it's like, and what am I really good at? I'm really good at coaching a certain type of person on a certain type of mindset and conversation. That is why I am here. Other stuff, not so much. So, and each of us could have the conversation about what you are uniquely superb at. So I think but it starts with taking yourself seriously. If you don't, none of this is available. And if you do, all of it is. So that would actually be the starting point, if that makes sense.
Love it, Shannon. Really appreciate you coming on the show today. Really grateful for the opportunity to share your wisdom with the audience. And if people want to learn more about Strategic Coach or connect with you, what's really the best place?
Oh my goodness. Strategiccoach.com. We have all the things. There is a resource hub there that is crazy with resources if someone's interested. But if you actually want to look at applying the tools and concepts as you do, Dave, and integrate them into your own life, check out the website and then book a call, because we have a great process where we actually ask you that future-based question for 3 years, not one, to help you figure out where you want to go, and then whether or not what we have to offer is in service of that. If it's not, we will tell you. We are not for everybody. Not everybody is for us. So that would be the number one thing to check out with Strategic Coach. Then inside Strategic Coach podcast, I have a team success podcast because I am passionate about all things entrepreneurial team related. And then, so check me out on LinkedIn. It's probably the best thing to do. So it's just Shannon Waller, and you'll see all the things, all the resources. Yourteamsuccess.com has some fun free downloads if that's a passion of yours too. That's kind of the best way to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shannon. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Dave. It is such a joy to talk to someone who is taking himself seriously, knows his unique ability, employs the DOS, does Colby, all the things. So thank you for being my kindred spirit. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks.